Hi, I'm Doug from Dynamic Computing, and welcome to episode 133 of 10-Minute Amiga Retrocast. First of all, thank you to everybody who emailed me, texted me, messaged me on Twitter and Instagram, wishing me well about my recent surgeries. They went just fine. Been out of the hospital for a week and feeling pretty darn good. No more Varda battery leakage inside my body. Second, there were two momentous occasions that happened in August that, for obvious reasons, I didn't get a chance to cover. Number one, this is my channel's 4-year anniversary in August, which is just amazing to me. I can't believe it's already been 4 years. And second, 6,000 subscribers. I've just reached 6,000 subscribers and I couldn't be happier. That is just fantastic. Thank you all for your support. I literally wouldn't be doing this without you guys watching. But now, on to the Amiga goodness. So while I was laid up for about 3 weeks not feeling well at all, including a week in the hospital, my ability to spend money on 30-year-old retro computers somehow was not hindered. I spent a lot of time on eBay and some of my favorite vendors and placed some orders, so now I'm poor. But one thing I did get is the Elbox FastATA MK-V IDE adapter for the Amiga 1200 from our good friends at amigastore.eu. So what is this little trinket right here? Well, it speeds up our hard drive access on our Amiga 1200s. The way it works is that it mounts into the Amiga 1200 right onto the Gale chip, which I'll show you in a second. Then it's got a little adapter board that plugs into your ROM sockets, and you take your ROMs out, plug them into the top, and Bob's your uncle, whatever the heck that means. But let's talk about the onboard IDE of the Amiga 1200 for a minute. Now, back in 1992, when it came out in the Amiga 1200, we were pretty happy that we finally had a built-in hard drive interface for our Amigas. We've always had to add them separately. It's never been a problem. But the problem is, this was a particularly bad IDE implementation. First off, it's an unbuffered connection, which means it basically has direct connection to the Gale chip and the CPU, and there's nothing in between that's buffering the signals. What this means in the real world is that you can't use a cable longer than like 2 inches, or maybe if you really push it 3 inches, you just can't, which pretty much means everything's got to be right there next to the connector, which in an Amiga 1200 is okay. The second big thing is that it only supported a technology called PIO0. Now, IDE was still fairly new, just a couple of years old at that time, but PIO speeds were the absolute bottom of the barrel, lowest performing implementation of IDE that existed. That means on a good day when, Venus is rising over Sagittarius and the wind is coming in from the east, that you might get between 1.5 megabytes per second and 1.7 megabytes per second out of a fully optimized IDE connection on an Amiga 1200. Not horrible at all, but not particularly good either. A third issue is you couldn't really add a second drive onto the IDE bus. Not that in theory it wasn't possible for the Amiga to support 2 devices. It's just with the cable length limitations, it just didn't work. There's too much electrical interference. Didn't work well at all. A few products over the years tried to address this. One of them I bought back in around 2000 or 2001. It was the 4X IDE, which was a little device that plugs into the IDE, adds some buffering chips and some logic, and then allows you to use up to 4 different devices with longer cables. Does not affect the performance at all. It's still PIO 0, same 1.6 megabytes per second data transfer. But it did allow me to string an IDE cable out the side and hook up an external CD-ROM drive, and it worked. It was weird, but it worked. Then came the Elbox FastATA line. They've had version 1 and now they're up to version 5. And like I mentioned, mounts right on top of your Gale, which we're going to take a look at, mounts into your ROM sockets, which we're going to take a look at, has a little jumper that leads to your IDE connector, so it grabs the LED signal, so it'll flash your little lights. And as you can see in the picture, the FastATA has a couple of little logic chips on there. They get quite hot, so we may want to put some heat sinks on there. Now you can see that it has 44 pin, just like the Amiga, and it also has two 40 pin connectors on it here. Now the first 44 and 40 pin IDE connector, they're mutually exclusive. You use one or the other. You can't use both. You can't hook up 6 devices, but you can hook up 4 devices and they work just fine. So stringing out an IDE cable to a CD-ROM or an external zip drive, or I've even heard of people putting an internal IDE zip drive in place of the floppy, which, you know, interesting. Now, most importantly, this device supports PIO 0, 3, and 4. Now, PIO 0 tops out at 3.3 megabytes per second in theory. PIO 3 is 11.1 megabytes per second, and PIO 4 is 16.6 megabytes per second. Now, you may be asking, what happened to poor PIOs 1 and PIO 2? Well, nobody likes them and they can't stay in play. We don't want to even touch them. Another feature built in is integrated support for drives larger than 4 gigs. Now on our newer Amiga installations, we don't worry about that, but in the past we were limited basically to 4 gigabytes. Now your file system still needs to support larger than 4 gigs. So if you try to hook up, you've got say AmigaOS 3.1, you hook up at an 8 gig CF card, try to format it for the full amount. With fast file system, you're still going to have a problem. You need to use a file system that also supports the larger drives like PFS. So in a nutshell, it allows us to use bigger and faster devices, and even our existing devices will run substantially faster. Now let's take a look how we install the little guy. Well, if you have no other hardware in your Amiga, it's a really simple installation for the most part. This interface here, this pops down and clips right on top of the Gale chip. So you poke it down right on top of the Gale chip. There's only one way it can go in because there's only one way its little connector cable is going to actually fit with the device. So there's only really one way this guy is going to fit on here. Press it down, make sure it clicks into place. That then passes the signals from Gale on into this main board. You see it, like I was talking about, you've got your 3 chips right here, your control chips, you've got your 44 pin connector here, and you've got 2 40 pin connectors here and here. Obviously, my interface that I'm using for my CF card is not the ideal one in this situation because it blocks those 2 connectors. I have other solutions I'm planning on using. This is just for the show here. You're going to pop your 2 ROMs out of your ROM sockets down here on the board, and you're going to put low ROM or high ROM on the bottom, low ROM on the top. You're going to plug that into the top of this interface board, and then this entire board seats right down into your ROM chip sockets. Now be aware that lots of Amiga 1200s have 42 pin ROM sockets down here. If you can see, let's zoom in, there's actually a 42 pin socket here, but the ROMs are only 40 pin. So always go one back and leave this one on the left wide open here. Not all Amiga 1200s are like this, but a lot of them are. Now the next thing you see here is this black cable that goes around and plugs onto your IDE port. This plugs into pin 39 on your IDE port, and strangely pin 39 is not the pin that I thought it was on a 44 pin port here. So I want to get a nice close-up image of where pin 39 is. On the right hand side looks like it's the 3rd pin from the bottom. That's where that plugs in, and that's where it grabs the signal for the LED light for the hard drive. Now you can see here in the included paperwork, the included manual, you can see they're trying to show you where pin 39 is, but everything's in black and white or grayscale, so you can barely see any of these pictures. It actually looks better through the camera than it does to the naked eye. Now here's a little hint to my good friends at Elbox. Color printers are a real thing, both laser and inkjet, and they've been a real thing since the 90s. Buy one, print out the manuals in color so we can see them. That would be cool. Now, if you had a traditional Amiga 1200 with no other hardware, you'd be pretty much done with the installation. But you'll notice I have the awesome Indivision MK2 right here. And if you plug this device in, just into the ROM sockets, it's going to literally run into the MK2 and it's not going to fit. Both devices want to sit right there. So what do we generally do? Well, I bought some 40-pin ROM sockets, just some bare sockets. I bought 4 of them. Stack 1, 2, and then 1 and 2 right behind it. That elevates the FastATA adapter here. It elevates it high enough where it actually clears the MK2 board by about a millimeter or so, millimeter and a half, but it does clear it. And it also still leaves room to put the keyboard on here. I've tried it, keyboard clears it too. So that's the solution. Now, our good friends at Amigakit, they sell an adapter that you can see right there. That's a ROM adapter that's angled and is designed just for this issue. And I wish I would have known about it 5 days ago before I placed my order with Matthew there. And he could have shipped me one. But that's okay. I'll probably get one anyways in a few weeks. But in the meantime, this works okay. Now, full disclosure, when I first installed it like this, all I got was a black screen. Nothing else but a black screen. No floppy access or anything. Turns out the pins on the bottom of this adapter board are very short and they were not making good contact with these ROM sockets. So I had to put the ROM sockets on and then spend a bunch of time really pushing them hard on there so they made good contact and just shoving them in there. It took about 5-6 minutes of finessing to get the ROM sockets to fit tightly. Once I did that, put everything back in, boom, she booted up just fine. So we've got the hardware installed for the FastATA MK-V, so everything's just going to be peaches and cream, right? The Amiga 1200 is going to boot right up, software installation will go smoothly, and I'll be just zooming along, right? No, not at all. See, there's some really annoying issues, and issues that really need to be fixed. Let's talk about those. First of all, the documentation for the FastATA says it works with AmigaOS 2.x, 3.0, 3.1, 3.5 and 3.9. Fantastic. That's great. What about 3.14, 3.2 and 3.21? You know, the ones that have been out for, like 3 years that so many of us are using? Nope. Doesn't say anything about compatibility because it breaks it. In my humble opinion, the people that make modern Amiga hardware need to take 20 minutes out of their day and test and make sure it works with the modern version of the operating systems. Even if you're a bitter, grumpy old man, Amiga OS 3.14 is for losers, I only use 3.1. Still, guess what? A lot of your customers use the newer operating systems, like me, myself, and if your hardware doesn't work with it, well, we're going to use different hardware. Just spend some time trying to fix it. And the creators of AmigaOS 3.2 are not innocent either. They need to make sure whatever they're doing does not break common hardware practices that we've been doing for 25 years. They need to make it as compatible as possible. And to be honest, a couple of emails between Elbox and the dudes making AmigaOS probably would have cleared up all the compatibility issues 3 years ago. Just come on, guys, talk to each other. So is it all for naught? It just won't work under my 3.2.1? Nay. I did find a workaround that we're going to get into in just a minute. So here's where our first problem comes up. And this same problem is going to be for most users of the software. The software comes on a 3.5-inch disc, which is fantastic. So we'll pop the disc in the disk drive. Should be recognized. There we are, FastATA 99. Open it up, and look at this. An installer, ATA3 installer, rock and roll. So let's install. Oh, unable to open your tool installer. That's strange. I install things every week in my Amiga. I've never had any problem with it. Let's see what's up here. Select a different tool. Oh, it's looking for one specifically called installer, but everybody from 3.1 to 3.2.1 uses the install program. Let's do that. Oh, look, it crashed the system. How handy. So I tried to use the install program for my AmigaOS 3.1 floppies. I tried to do just about everything. I looked on the floppy thinking, well, maybe the installer's on the floppy and I just need to find that. But you look on this floppy, there's no installer on here. So here's what they did. They use an installer from AmigaOS 3.5 and 3.9. You know, the ones that have not been available in like almost 20 years. They use this installer 43_3.lha. You decompress that. You have to download this installer from AmiNet, okay? I'll have the link in the description, but you download installer 43_3 from AmiNet, and apparently this is an installer that Amiga Inc. created for AmigaOS 3.5, but the thing is, they don't tell you that. They literally don't tell you it uses a totally different installer. So anything from your 2.x to your 3.1, your 3.14, 3.2, the installer is just not going to work. Now I've installed the new installer. Once you do that, the installer runs fine. Now, to be perfectly honest, it would take the guys 5 minutes to convert over to using the proper installer that we all use now. Literally 5 minutes to recode their script, to call the install program, done. It would also take them half a second to physically copy the installer program onto their included floppy. Just put the bloody thing on the floppy and this problem goes away. These are just oversights that have just like been there for 10 years and they haven't fixed them. Now when you run the installer, normally it's going to install the ATA 3 driver. It's going to install the Allegro CD-ROM drivers. I've already got all these things installed. This is where things get tricky with the newer operating systems. If you've got 2.x, 3.0, 3.1, 3.5, or 3.9, you're fine, you're golden. It puts that ATA.driver file at the very top of your startup sequence. That patches SCSI device as soon as the Amiga starts, and you're rocking and rolling with those operating systems. The problem is, with AmigaOS 3.1.4 and above, those versions of the operating system patch SCSI device themselves. So ATA3.driver patches it, and then 3 lines below, AmigaOS 3.2.1 patches the same SCSI device, and then it might patch it again, which completely screws things up. Now we have a SCSI device that is just a mess. And what were the results of this? Well, mine seemed to work fine for a couple of minutes, and then it started reporting corrupt clusters on my beautiful little CF card, and it got to the point after about a minute where it was totally unbootable. You'd try to boot and it would say bad clusters, then I tried to boot again and it would just come up with a kickstart screen. Bad news. Now I quickly removed my CF card, brought it out to my WinUAE machine, backed it up totally. It appeared to be fine. Went into the startup sequence of it on WinUAE, removed the ATA driver, ran a full check of the CF card. Again, I said it was fine, and it was able to boot again, sans the driver. So on to Google I went to find a solution to see if the FastATA MK-V is going to work with 3.14, 3.2, or 3.21. Well, the general consensus was, yeah, it kind of sort of doesn't work with it. And then some people said, oh, mine works fine, but I think they may have been doing it wrong. But nobody really had a solution. Nobody said, yes, we got it working, here it is. So I did more and more digging, and I got one hit from this website right here. And I'm also going to post that website in the description. Now, I looked for the author of the document, but I could not find a name. But whoever created this grimoire.org/fuss/Amiga, thank you. This is 100% you as to why this is working, and I'm going to share the fix with all my friends. So let's take a look at what we have to do, and it's fairly simple. It's just a few minutes in the startup sequence. Come on over, let's take a peek. So by default, it's going to add a new command to your startup sequence. So let's start by opening up our good old startup sequence in my favorite editor. By default, way up here at the top, it says C:ATA3.driver right above this stat command. So it loads that driver and updates SCSI before anything else happens in the system. But then AmigaOS 3, the newer versions, come down here and they do these ROM updates and they do these load modules and they do the set patch, and it completely screws up the SCSI device. No longer works. Here's the fix, and I'm going to also have a link to the website. Load module, system startup, ROM update. That's what you're normally going to have here. This is what you're going to add. Downgrade at the end. This is going to allow the system to still boot even though something's going to happen with the SCSI device. Type in the command downgrade right there. Then past this load module here, you do if exists C:ATA3.driver, then you load the driver, and if. You do that after the load module. Then set patch. If you're on 3.2.1, you don't need to add anything else to set patch. If you're on 3.14 or 3.2, you have to add this command no drive LED patch, and I'll have that printed out at the bottom, and it's also in the description. But version 3.2.1, set patch ignores that patch anyways, I've discovered, so you don't need it. But earlier versions, set patch, no drive LED patch right there. Do all that. It bypasses updating SCSI device by itself. Here it lets the ATA3 driver do it. Let set patch run, and then all of a sudden, boom, we work. Brilliant. So the utility says my device can handle PIO5. The computer allows me to set it to PIO4. Why didn't I do that? Why did I use 3? Well, I tried to use PIO4 on this particular interface, and I got weird results. It would boot up, the Amiga would act normal, everything seems to be just chugging along fine, doing day-to-day stuff. But the minute you have it do anything that requires a lot of hard drive use, like loading a big 10 meg file, or running the disk check pro or the disk speed program, which really hits your disk hard and checks for performance, every single time, crash the machine, reboot. Crash the machine, reboot. Setting it to PIO3, everything was fine. All my utilities work, all my programs work. It's not quite as theoretically fast, but I would say it could be that little interface that I'm using for the CF card. It may not be able to handle PIO4 speeds. Why would it? It's not designed to. It's just a little cheap interface. So with a different interface, different CF card, or using an actual hard drive or an SSD, they actually do make IDE SSD cards. Here's a link to a review that I had of some. I think I could enable PIO4 just fine and get even better results. Now PIO3 says it's 11.1 megabytes per second. Anytime you hear a vendor say, supports speeds up to XXX, they're lying. They're just lying. Your internet connection, you know, oh yeah, for 300 megabits per second. Freaking liars. It will only hit that occasionally and theoretically supports it. In reality, hard drive speeds, internet speeds, any kind of speed, 20-30% below what they claim it supports is what you're realistically going to see. Just physics that causes that kind of stuff. So we've got the new controller installed. We worked around the issues with it running on newer Amiga operating systems. We've come up with a solution. We've determined it'll work at PIO3 speeds, which are pretty good, and it is really, really noticeable, the performance difference. What do I need these speeds for? I mean, you know, if you're just loading some programs or playing some games, aren't the regular IDE speeds fine? Well, no, because we all want bigger, better, faster, more. It's just in our natures. And I use this Amiga, and I'm going to use it again this year for Amiga Art Contest. I actually stream probably 90% of the pictures and videos and mod files right off my Amiga 1200, so I wanted to perform as well as humanly possible when I present the Amiga Art Contest, which is coming up in October. Haven't heard of the Amiga Art Contest? Well, pop on over to www.amigaartwork.com and you can learn all about it. I also spend a lot of time loading up big files in Image Effects and Art Department Professional. I mean, some of these JPEGs I'm working with are 10, 11 megabytes, which doesn't sound like much, but for a 1992 Amiga, that's a lot of data. Anything I can do to bring the data in faster and save it faster, that saves me time. That's important. So I really enjoy the extra speed boost this thing has given me. It also works much better playing back video from the hard drive. You probably saw a week or two, about a month ago, when I did an AGA Blaster video of the promotion for Amiga Art Contest. There's the link right there. So AGA Blaster videos play back quicker. My Ham 6 and Ham 8 videos play back quicker. Anything that requires pulling data off the hard drive, just going to perform better. So what are my thoughts about the FastATA hard drive controller? Well, it's reasonably priced, you know, 110, 120 bucks, something like that. It's not too bad. I love the performance for sure. I really love the extra performance. It's made quite a difference on my Amiga 1200. It opens up interesting possibilities like zip drives and CD-ROMs, you know, mostly if you have a towerized Amiga 1200. But it's not impossible to run the cables out the side and have a couple little extra IDE devices there. This would work exceptionally well in Stephen Jones' Checkmate 1500 case. Here's my review on it. You get the Amiga 1200 installed in there with his little kits and doodads, and you have plenty of room to put in hard drives, a little slimline seat IDE CD-ROM, a zip drive, plenty of room in the case for it. It would make an ideal power case for the Amiga 1200. But nothing is perfect. Like I mentioned before, Elbox desperately needs to upgrade their floppy disk. Just putting on an installer program that's broken out of the box for probably 80% of their customers, because we're not using 3.5 and 3.9 for the most part. We're using 3.1, 3.14, 3.2, 3.21. Sorry, we are. And it's broken out of the box, and it's a super easy fix. So please, Elbox, fix that. And the compatibility issues with AmigaOS 3.2, very least, document that in the manual, put it on a FAQ on your website, release it to the public. Yes, this works. This is the 3 lines of code you need to change to get it to actually work. Please just do that. It's going to help your customers. Print the documentation in color so we can actually see the images, because honestly, the images on the documentation, they were useless. You can't say anything. It's just a blur of grayscales. And lastly, use some different ROM sockets. Your pins are so short on there that it's hard to make good, reliable contact. You gotta just, and you gotta zip tie it down. Just use a longer ROM socket, you know, another 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters. That's gonna give us some flexibility where everything just fits better and makes better contact. Huge thanks to my wonderful patrons who you see scrolling across one of last year's winners of the Amiga Art Contest. Now, if you want to become a patron and support the show as little as $2 a month and have the ability to vote in the Amiga Art Contest and get to see all the pictures a little bit in advance, stop on by to patreon.com/10mark for more information. Thanks, everyone. You are the best. Thanks so much for joining me today on this little review of the FastATA MK-V. I appreciate it. Please follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Looking forward to getting 10,000 subs. That's my next big goal. Although really, 6502 should be my next goal. Yeah, 6502. That'll be the next one I talk about. Please comment below. Tell me about your experiences with this particular device or other hard drive enhancements for your Amigas. I'd love to hear from you guys about what you use, how you use it, and what you feel about the performance. There's a new merch store that I have. I've got the link right here. And in it, I'm selling some t-shirts, some mugs, some jugs, and what else do I have on there? I think I've got a bag. That's what I have on there, a 10-mark bag. Everybody needs a 10-mark bag, don't you think? I'll put some new merch up there in the next couple of days too. And trust me, every penny I make off that, it goes right back into the right back into the show. But until next time, this is Doug from 10 Minute Amiga Retrocast, signing out.